There is a lot of news, though. It looks like Kavanaugh is going to be confirmed. I'm not of any way that aware of any way that that could go differently.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much a slam dunk at this point.
Yeah. Once again, I just want to say to all the people who out there who are hurting like I am, and have been for about 2 years, keep fighting. Keep your chin up. Things have got to change.
I want to mention something really quickly. It just dawned on me, but I had a thread about it, and obviously I've been, furiously posting about the hearings and about what's going on. And there was a woman who posted on my wall, like on one of the OPs, as a comment, that she felt ill about it. Now, I happen to know the person, and I knew that they had a history of sexual abuse, but somebody else didn't. And so they took it as just a general comment, like, oh, this makes me sick. And I understand that. This in no way is denigrating the person who took it in a way that, most of the time when you hear it, that's what it means. But because I knew her context, I was like, that's not what she's saying. And he was just like, yeah, don't get angry, like get out there and help us fight this. And I'm like, oh, no, that's like the wrong message here, right? And before I had seen it, she had already replied and kind of just nicely explained her situation and said, it's just that, this is like, there's a history for me, and it's not that I'm saying I'm angry so much as I think I'm going to need to withdraw for a while, and I can't do this.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that people are going to have to take some caution with, because it didn't really dawn on me until I saw it, right? Till I saw her post. And so I certainly don't blame people for not being cognizant of this, because, I was in that same boat until I saw her post. But be aware that people who are victims of sexual assault at this point are maybe really sensitive to this in a way that makes them feel like they've just been victimized again. So I think it's really important to understand that some of the people who are probably the most upset about this are upset in a way where maybe they're not in a position where they really feel like fighting right now. They maybe feel like just going fetal for a few weeks, or, just saying like, I can't deal with this and I have to get away from it for a little bit. It isn't that they're, weak or unwilling to advocate or anything like that. It's just a visceral response that they are feeling that you can't just shake it off. It's not like, oh, go walk it off, right? I mean, they are re-traumatized by this.
Right. And I'm one of those people.
Yeah.
So.
And frankly, it doesn't even matter. Even if you're one of the people who was just like, I don't think Kavanaugh did anything wrong, you still need to be aware that this is a situation that's going to make those people more vulnerable. So it's not even, it's irrelevant where you stand on the issue. You just have to be aware that what they're seeing when they heard those attacks about she doesn't remember everything, and they're thinking that's really common for sexual assault victims, right? I mean, and I posted something about that too, the idea that if you want to attack somebody who's telling a story, if you don't believe them and you want to attack it, the wrong way to attack it is to attack those elements of what they're doing or saying that are in common with legitimate victims. Right. Like, let's say that there was somebody that I didn't believe, that I thought, whoa, their story is full of holes. They have these contradictions that are just glaring, and there's real problems with her story. If I felt that way, I would not attack her based on metrics that she shares with legitimate victims. I would be looking at the things where it differs and say, this is not like what a victim does. Pointing to the things that victims actually do and saying, this makes you not legitimate, is actually not even an attack on her so much as an attack on sexual assault victims. So be sure before you start pointing at things that you think are problematic about the particular situation, that you're not also just throwing every other sexual assault victim under the bus because of your ignorance about how sexual assault impacts people. Just be aware.
Amen. Amen. Yeah, empathy. It's all about empathy. Maybe you don't understand it instead of attacking it, which is what I've seen over and over again. And I've been fighting on Facebook about this quite a bit. Step back, and if someone says it's awful, believe them. Don't try to explain to them why it's not awful. It is awful. I'm trying to, I can't find it yet, but there was an article that I kept posting over and over again about the characteristics of people who make false accusations.
Oh,
And it outlined it very well. The people who make false accusations, they don't do it because they regretted it in the morning or something silly like that. That's absurd. Women who have experienced real awful rapes don't report it, or don't make those accusations. So just like trying to save face by saying that the guy raped, that's patently absurd. Women don't do that. People don't do that. It's going to be somebody who has, excuse me, some sort of problem. They usually have a history of making up wild tales and being a little off base.
And let me just point out that a history of being litigious is not the same as a history of and so that was one of the problems I saw. And like I say, I am not saying that if you think you see a legitimate problem with someone's story that you cannot call it out. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying don't call out things that don't delegitimize somebody as a means to delegitimize them, right? Like go for the things that you think would actually delegitimize them that actually align with the reality of what would delegitimize a person. Don't go for things that actually wouldn't delegitimize. And so when Swetnick came out, I'm going to be honest, I didn't read that much about Swetnick's claim. I understood what it was. I know what Mark Judge had, what his ex said about the things he had expressed to her about the gang rape situation. And at the same time, people brought up this thing and said, oh, she's got this litigious history. She's got all these legal things behind her. And I kind of thought, well, is that relevant? Like, what kinds of legal things are we talking about? And so I went in and they were like, oh, she had this restraining order against her for an ex-boyfriend. I think it was Donald Trump Jr. was blasting that on Twitter. And so I went and looked it up to see, what is it? What's going on here? And I've looked these things up. Like a couple times I've looked at stories that were like, oh, there's problems with Ford's account. And so I went and read through it. It's not like I'm ignoring information that's coming from people who are claiming to be critical of her. I am looking at it and saying, do I agree that these are delegitimizing things? And I'm not finding that they are. Yeah. But with Swetnick, the issue was that she did have an ex that filed for a restraining order and then didn't go to court and get it, right? Like, so when the court day came, they didn't show, and so there was no restraining order. I don't know what the situation was, but being clingy is different than being a liar about sexual assault, right? So if you, when I say clingy, I understand that sounds, that might sound dismissive, and I don't mean that. If somebody really is harassing you, there's nothing minor about that. If you've been harassed by someone, that is not cool. And, especially if you think even briefly, even if you change your mind, even if it makes you briefly consider that you have to file a restraining order, that's serious. Like I'm not blowing that off when I say, clingy. But even a person who doesn't understand the boundaries of, hey, I want to be with you and you're saying leave you alone and I don't get that, that doesn't mean that they're dishonest. They may have issues, but those issues don't revolve around lying. So it's about lying about sexual assault. And so show me the litigation where she's like constantly accusing people of sexual assault, like all over the map.
Right.
And now you've got something, because now you've got a person who's like getting into accusations all the time, right? And that was one of the metrics that was listed in that article, was that they have a history of accusing people of things that are, and so I did not find that in the history of litigation that they put forward for her. I was like, I see, some litigation here, and obviously I'm a person who has very little litigation in my background, so almost anybody who's had to litigate things, like I have a friend who's done a few lawsuits for personal injury. And I could definitely see somebody coming forward and saying, oh, well, she's been and done a couple, she's always suing at the drop of it. And it's like, well, no, she just happens to have had a couple of accidents where there was liability on part of someone else. That can happen.
It does.
You can actually find yourself in that situation more than once in a lifetime.
Yes, or even thrice.
And so, but I mean, I do get how somebody could be, hey, they have this history of always suing for personal, and whatever. And that might be something at least worth looking at. And I say that as somebody who has a friend that I know has been in legitimate situations, but there's multiple multiple cases in her background where I could see somebody saying, hey, there's a history, there's a pattern of these accusations for personal liability. And certainly I would probably consider that more than, hey, she's had some lawsuits where it was over estate settlements. I would be like, why is that relevant? Right? Why would that be relevant to litigation in a personal injury case?
Yeah, right. Last week we did an extra show. Jen Peoples was here, and Tracie was out of town, so we're doing this back.
So next time it's you get to be gone.
Right.
Yeah. I actually thought the YouTube video too. I just want to mention this because it was funny. Somebody said, "Hey, that's not Tracie. Ha ha! Really great show." And I thought, "Ow!" I don't know that they meant it that way, but it just came out as very funny.
That's funny. Yeah. Which, and by the way, they can't possibly have meant the way. Right?
I'm not loved by all. So
then I disagree with them. Anyhow, we had an extra show last week, and if you're a regular listener, or if you're interested in learning more about what a professional's take would be on Ford's testimony and Kavanaugh's behavior, we had someone who had 20 plus years of experience in sexual assault in terms of counseling people who've been through it. She's worked at Safe Place for forever, and she said she had worked with over 3,800 victims of sexual assault. So that's an expert to me. Leanne Cameron, she was amazing. So check out last week's show, and you'll be educated, I promise. She really knocked it out of the park. I was very happy.
And I've had a chance to go back and watch it, and it was a good viewing.
Yeah.
So I liked that show.
Right. She was really great. So yeah, Kavanaugh. So if he does, well, he will be confirmed. I've seen articles about maybe he would get impeached, and I don't hold out much hope for that, given that everything else.
You'd have to have more than just a majority in the House, I think, to make that happen.
Oh yeah.
So,
because he has perjured, that's very clear.
I think so. I mean,
not in this trial, or not in this proceeding in 2006.
I think in these proceedings he did.
Well, yeah.
I was especially kind of, I mean, some of the stuff I understand is going to be flexible with regards to how do you categorize certain behaviors. Mm-hmm. But like, for instance, the asking, telling Leahy, hey, I don't know if I was Bart Kavanaugh, and then I'm looking at something he wrote and signed in high school as Bart. It's like, okay, so what was that? I mean, what was that? That was feigned ignorance, right? I mean, you knew that was your nickname.
I agree with that assessment. When you do the research out on the internet, those are not judged terribly harshly. And so I don't, when I put forward instances where he's been accused of perjury, I go for the ones that are solid. And in 2006, there were solid. There was a solid case in which he perjured. And, that's, you might think, okay, so lying in court, that's not a big deal. That's like a cop stealing stereos. He's supposed to be a judge. He's supposed to be impeccable. And lying as a judge under oath is just, it's unconscionable. You just don't do, and you certainly don't get on the Supreme Court. But we do here in the United States. This whole thing just kills me. It just kills me. I'm having a really hard time with it, actually. So I get it if y'all are hurting.